We're going to finish up last week's sermon, which I was so rudely interrupted by the clock, the tyranny of the time, but that's okay. We're going to revisit where we left off, and then we'll move forward. So previously, in our Jewish journey through the Gospel of Mark, we began a new section in Mark, in chapter 2, and this was a section that I call Jesus Shops for Levites. Actually, only one specific Levi. He went out again by the seashore, and all the people were coming to him, and he was teaching them. And as he passed by, he saw Levi, the son of Alphaeus, sitting in the tax booth. And he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. Remember what a tax collector is? He's a toll collector. He's the toll booth. It's not automated. It's just like back in the 70s and 80s when there was still a guy that you had to pay in the toll booth. And if you needed change made, except these toll booths, these toll collectors, they never really made change. They asked for more. And he would size you up. A toll collector in those days was a great position if you wanted to increase your financial power, because you got to size up. There was no one toll fits all. The guy would size you up and say, "I think that you can afford this," and he would charge you accordingly. And whatever was in surplus, in excess of what he needed to pay the Roman government, he kept for himself. That's where Johnny B in that video was telling the tax collector, don't collect more than, don't enrich yourself in your position. In other words, just work. And so this fella, Matthew Levy, he had seen Yeshua and was ready to go. When the call came, he said, "Take this job and leave it behind." And he got up and he followed him. And it happened that he was reclining at the table in his house. And again, this is how banquets. So Levi, who is a man of means, he is throwing a banquet. And we're going to have a nice social mix of these tax collectors who are fairly well-to-do, but they are social pariahs because of how they make their money. And then the disciples. So talk about mix and mingle. That's quite a meet and greet. And so we've got this great banquet going on, and many tax collectors and sinners were dining with Jesus and his disciples. For there were many of them, and they were following him. Well, when the scribes of the Pharisees, these are the lawyers of the Pharisees, remember, who are the most scrupulous, most punctilious religious sect within Judaism, in first century Judaism, Second Temple Judaism. So these are the lawyers who really know the law. When the Torah, and the oral Torah, when the scribes of the Pharisees saw that he was eating with the sinners and tax collectors, they said to his disciples, "Why is he eating and drinking with tax collectors and sinners?" Hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It's not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick." And here we have a beautiful mission statement, a beautiful purpose statement. I love to collect the purpose statements, particularly of the Gospels, where Jesus is telling you exactly what his plan, what his program, what his mission is. He said, "I did not come to call the righteous." The righteous are okay, right? If there are righteous. "I came to call sinners." Now, of course, the back end of that, the subtext of "I did not come to call the righteous but sinners," is, of course, this beautiful verse from Isaiah 53, verse 6, which simply states in black and white terms, leaving no room for ambiguity, all of us, all, not some, not a few, not most, not a minority, majority, all of us, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. Paul says this pretty eloquently in Romans. There's none righteous. No, not one. So when Jesus says, I came not to call the righteous, but sinners, if there are no righteous, then the back end of this is, I've come to call you, whether you're conscious of your sin or unconscious of your sin. I have come to call sinners. We begin a new section immediately. Mark juxtaposes, making this beautiful collage or decoupage, or however you want to picture the Gospel of Mark, this thematically play. And he puts these two stories together, matches them up. And this is a story I call Not So Fast, because it has to do with a fast. See, see what I did there? Yeah. All right, you'll think about it later. You got it. All right, John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. And they came and they said to him, now, it's to me two questions. We've already heard one question, which was, why are you sitting and eating with sinners and the socially unacceptable among religious circles? Why are you slumming it, Lord? Or why are you slumming it, Rabbi? Rather. And the second question is, why did John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast? In other words, why do they do things correctly, but your disciples do not? Why are your disciples doing things incorrectly? Now, that is an important statement, and I'm missing a slide here, but perhaps we shall find it after the Q&A. Well, suffice it to say that Yeshua's answer is going to use the imagery of a wedding. And we see here a bride and a groom, how the mighty have fallen, back in 1993, so 32 years ago. Why do John's disciples, the disciples of Christ, your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said to them, here's the answer, where the question is why the picture was there. While the bridegroom is with them, the attendants of the bridegroom cannot fast, can they? Jesus, as usual, very Jewish tradition, Jewish technique, answering a question with a question. You're going to ask me a question, I'm going to ask you a question. We'll get to the heart of the matter. And he says, wedding imagery, while the bridegroom is with them, the attendants of the bridegroom cannot fast. So if we think about the way the Pharisees, the common way of living their lives, the religiously observant would observe this regular custom of fasting that they're asking about here. For example, the Pharisees, they fasted twice a week as part of their religious custom. I don't know how often Johnny B's disciples fasted. Obviously, a difference between your customs and the customs of what has become accepted religious practice, they're saying. The way we show religious devotion, one of the ways, is by fasting. We do it. Your disciples don't do it. Jesus answers this question with a question. And he's basically saying, if you're at a wedding And the bridegroom is in the midst. And you're at the wedding. Now, it's very interesting, by the way, as a side note, because when we speak of weddings in our parlance today, 21st, the person who we mostly focus in on is the bride. Let's be honest, in most wedding scenarios today, the bridegroom is just shy of an afterthought. The bride is but in Jesus' day, and he was referring to himself as the bridegroom, not the bride, obviously. So if the bridegroom is in your midst and you're at a wedding, are you going to say, well, I'm sorry, I'm fasting? Do you have any idea how much I paid per plate to invite you to my wedding, and make a beautiful meal, and how many tastings I sat through so that you can tell me you're fasting? Right? This is a joyful occasion. How many of you have been to a Jewish wedding? Raise your hand if you've been to a Jewish wedding. A few of you, right? So as long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. That's Yeshua's answer to the question. As long as they're the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. So when we think about a Jewish wedding, it is a festive, joyful occasion, very gala, joyful affair with dancing and music and tons of food. In those days, it actually was a week-long affair. Right? My in-laws were, I'm sure, very happy that we didn't live 2,000 years ago, because a week of that would have broken them, right? That you wouldn't think about coming to a big occasion. Somebody invites you to the wedding. You wouldn't think about coming to a big occasion and saying, thank you for your hospitality. Everything looks delicious, but I'm on a diet right now. I'm fasting right now. You'd be the only schmo in the room with that attitude. Everybody else is partying. And what are you going to have, a rice cake? No, you're going to eat. Nobody fasts at a wedding. I've never seen it. Nobody's on a diet at a wedding. Are you going to be the only person in the room who turns down a piece of wedding cake? Come on. And so if you're going to have a wedding cake, here we go. If you're going to have a wedding cake, and they go through all, they look at that beautiful cake. You have a beautiful cake like this, and you say, well, no, thank you. I'm watching my weight, right? Don't insult the bride and groom, right? And let's be honest. Have the bride and groom, everybody gets a photo, the bride and groom. They cut the wedding cake. It always killed my wife and I. We made a pact before our wedding that we were not going to do like so many we see when they cut the cake and they're serving each other a piece of cake, whatever, to smush the cake in the bridegroom or whatever's face, right? No, because we actually spent a lot of time and effort to make sure that that cake was the most delicious wedding cake that we could choose. And we weren't going to waste one precious crumb. And so we ate it very, very carefully, each forkful landing in our mouths. And let's be honest, not every wedding cake is as delicious as some others, right? Some wedding cakes terrific, some less good. But nonetheless, whether the wedding cake is or if it's amazing, if you're there, you're participating in the joy of the occasion. And somebody says, when the waiter brings around the cake, no, thank you, I'm watching my figure. Eat the cake. It's a wedding. Eat the cake. What's the matter with you? Who turns down a piece of cake at a wedding? You may say it's a vanilla cake. I'm not a vanilla person, right? Have the groom's cake. I'm a chocolate guy, right? Whatever the case may be. Have the cake, right? If they don't have chocolate cake, have a chocolate cake tomorrow. Eat the vanilla cake. Doesn't matter what. Don't insult the bride and groom. Obviously, the answer is when you're at a wedding, when the bridegroom is there, the man of honor, nobody's there to fast. Right? It's a party. But Yeshua continues. Days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast in that day. The time will come. You ever been to a wedding where the groom gets taken away? You might see the groom and bride disappear for a moment, but you never see the bridegroom taken away, forcibly removed. He's saying days are going to come when the bridegroom in this wedding analogy will be taken away from the wedding party. And when that happens, there'll be plenty of time to fast later. But while the bridegroom is with you, there's no fasting. Obviously, the bridegroom in the illustration is Jesus, right? Jesus is saying, I'm the bridegroom, without saying, I'm the bridegroom. You can be listening, right? Now, if John, author, not Johnny B., but the author of John's Gospel, the apostle, if John were writing the story, you know what he would have said. He would have said, well, Jesus said, just like he said, I'm the door, I'm the way, I'm the sheep, gate of the sheepfold. I'm the bridegroom, right? But John's not telling the story. Mark's telling the story. Mark's telling a little story. You gotta, as a reader, you gotta connect the dots. It's party time right now. There'll be plenty of time to fast later. Because for now, Jesus says, I am here. So we have a statement, in other words, that not only is answered with a question, but presents Yeshua, Jesus, in such a way that he becomes the central focus of what's happening at this moment. Yeshua is the leader of that group. There's a party going on. Why? Because when the king is there in their midst, the kingdom is imminent. Why? Because Yeshua is the king. And without saying all these things, without spelling everything out, the reader, you, me, we're left to draw our own educated conclusions. And one maybe perhaps saying, you may be saying, that what Jesus is saying is completely inscrutable to me. I have no idea what he's talking about. He speaks in cryptic language. I don't get it. Or you can simply dig a little deeper. And so yeah, Jesus is the disciple, is the bridegroom. And that's why his disciples do not fast. Because they're experiencing the joy like a wedding with him there. But this is called foreshadowing, people. He is preparing his disciples for a time when he will not be with them any longer. He'll be taken away from them. The party will end. Now, as a reader, that thought leads me into deep contemplation regarding what Yeshua must be talking about, assuming that I haven't read the rest of the gospel, that I know how the end works, right? Right. Of course, the reader is reading, maybe doesn't know, and the idea is read on and find out. Even if you know the ending, right? Enter into a world where the people described in the passage are living the story. You may, but they don't know the end of the story. For example, you know, it's been a long time since I've been on a roller coaster. But even if I know that the roller coaster ride, I've seen it on video, I've seen it on YouTube many times, whatever. I know it ends with a triple loop-de-loop and a drop-off into over water, or a big splashy finish, whatever the case may be. When you're riding the ride, even if you know intellectually how it ends, while you're on the ride, you don't think about what's coming later. You're just experiencing what's happening at that moment. and you allow it to wash over you as you go through the journey. That is the Gospel of Mark in a nutshell. Now I want you to notice, what is the connection between Jesus and a roller coaster? This picture tells everything you need to know. Habitually, if you're riding a roller coaster, if you're watching sensibly from the ground and watching somebody else on a roller coaster go around, you see all the people instinctively, they're raising their hands to heaven. Right? That's a roller coaster, and that's the Christian life. Roll with it, enjoy it. We all know how it ends, right? You have the immediate end, which is, and I'm not talking about the roller coaster going flew. The end of life. We know how end of life is, but we also know on the other side of the end of life is glory. But in the meantime, we ride the ride. Jesus gives you another illustration. He says, no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. Otherwise, the patch pulls away from it, the new from the old, and a worse tear results. This is a very earthy illustration. Most of us probably have familiarity with that, right? When I was a kid, wear various different jeans. As a boy, well, whether you're a boy or a girl, your jeans wear and they tear up, and my mom would sew a patch onto the jeans and talk about a levy. Well, here we have a Levi, a pair of them. And the patch, remember, would be sewn into the jeans. And if the patch caused the jeans to tear a little bit more, it didn't really matter because it just made your jeans look that much cooler, right? We all know that there are fashionable young people today. You see them in restaurants walking around on the campus, whatever. Apparently, their jeans came with the cuts already in them. In fact, it costs more to get jeans that have artfully put, right? You wear them. Is anybody wearing jeans right now with the cuts that you paid for to actually come with the jeans? Anyway, right? You know how this goes, right? You pay for those jeans, right? Those tears for them are already ahead. They didn't occur organically. And so nobody patches anything anymore. It's been a long time since I've seen patched jeans. This is a remnant of the 70s, the 80s. Right? But if you patch clothes, which had already pre-shrunk, with a new piece of cloth that had not been pre-shrunk, then when it shrinks, it's going to tear the hole that you've just sewn up, and it'll make it worse than before. That, in other words, is what Yeshua is saying. I'm going to give you another story. He's good with the illustrations today. No one puts new wine into old wineskins. Well, most people aren't putting wine into wineskins at all, old or new today, but trust me, that 2,000 years ago, this was a big winner, okay? This is a great illustration, right? None of us put wine into wineskins anymore. I myself, I had to look in a book. Say, well, what do you mean? How were wineskins used? You never put new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins because they're old wineskins. It can't tolerate new wine. So new wine needs to go into new skins. You can't reuse your old wineskins. The wine is lost and the skins as well. But one puts new wine into fresh wineskins. Here's your illustration. You have an old, worn wineskin. It's literally goat skin, right? And you pour and you can't put because it's already been used, and it's going to burst on the bottom and it's going to pour out. That would have been a big winner of an illustration in Jesus' day. Harder for us to understand today, but nonetheless, the illustration helps. And the new wine is unfermented grape juice. you have an old wineskin, they're already expanded skins. So the grape juice goes in there, new wine, and it begins to ferment. And as it ferments, it begins to expand. And there's gas produced, and when enough gas is produced at a critical moment, and the skin is ruptured, you lose the wine, it pours out, and you lose the use of the skin. The way things were, standard operating procedure, prior to the bridegroom showing up, prior to new wine being available, in the time prior to Yeshua invading our history, in the time prior to the God-man interacting with humanity in Israel, there was one way. Old wine, old skin, old cloth, old patches. But you can't take the old and marry it to the new. There's a new era dawning. And about to burst forth is what Yeshua is saying. So when he talks about the kingdom is coming, that's what he means. A new era is dawning. How things used to be, standard operating procedure, is old news. The king is now in your midst. And that calls for new ways of doing things. A new era is dawning. Of course, that new era officially dawns with the bridegroom's death, burial, and resurrection. With the Messiah dying, being buried, resurrecting on the third day. And that's why so many of the apostles and the book of Hebrews, as we well know from spending time in there, speak of these last days. They're talking about, as Jesus was, a new era, a new dispensation, a new dawn, post-cross, post-resurrection, post-messianic invasion into history. There's a new way of doing things. The Mosaic covenant, which governed the lives of the people of Israel at that point for 1,500 years. What Yeshua is saying is that Mosaic covenant is about to momentarily, within just a few years from when Yeshua is talking, if this was toward the beginning of his ministry, then within 3.5 years, that Mosaic covenant will be abrogated. It will be superseded by a superior replacement covenant. What is that covenant called? The new covenant. That's not a new or reformed, rather, form of the old covenant, the Mosaic covenant, but a new covenant that stands in contradistinction. We spent a year in the book of Hebrews focusing on that very issue. Yeah. Jesus, prior to his arrival, he couldn't be the focal point of our lives. Of course, they had the expectation of his arrival, right? But God has a new way of dealing with people. New. Post-Jesus, everything is different. The new way is that for us to be reconciled to God, for he to be reconciled to us and us to him. For us, in order to have a relationship with God, requires Yeshua, the bridegroom, to be our focus. An abstract expectation could never really be the focus. It required Yeshua coming and teaching and revealing and dying and rising for us so that he showed us the focus. Right? Yeshua could not ever have been our focal point of our relationship with God, because while he had been promised in the Hebrew Bible, he had not yet arrived. He had not done what the Messiah was supposed to do, to live a perfect life, to identify fully with the people of Israel, to die on their behalf and be raised on the third day according to the Scriptures, so as to offer salvation not just for Israel, but for all humanity. From that point on, the new era dawns. All things are new. We have a new era called here in the New Testament, these last days, or the last days. And that's a elastic period of time, an indeterminate amount of time that will culminate in the rapture of the church, the tribulation period for those left behind, and the establishment of the Messianic kingdom when the Messiah returns with his hosts, his armies. These days are coming, but they're not now. What are we to do? You and I. What are we to do in an era where everything seems to be so very upside down? We face a world that's rapidly devolving, where up is now down. That which is evil is called good, and that which is good is called evil. Anybody know who this woman is? Lucy Connolly, British citizen. She was arrested and is sentenced to 2.5 years jail time. She's a mother, just a normal person. Jail time for a mean tweet. We live in a world where up is down and down is up. Good is evil and evil is good. You know who this guy is? Idol of millions. So many young people for 25 years, more, have idolized this pervert, this sickie. And the more we learn about him, the more disgusted we become. This hero of not just one generation, but multiple generations as they came up and enjoyed his music, not knowing what a sick individual, what a perverse individual he is. Do you know who this couple is? This is the young couple who were shot down like dogs in Washington, D.C. last week for the simple crime of being Jewish, coming out of a Jewish event. What the newspapers or the internet didn't report is that these two were believers in Yeshua. This guy has a family well known in the Messianic community, multiple generations, well known in Israel. And so we mourn for these two, not because their deaths were meaningless and unexplainable. And we mourn not only because the Jewish people have lost two, but as believers, we have lost two of our beautiful people. For the senseless anti-Semitism of this pathetic guy whose name I won't repeat, crying out a chant we've all heard now for a year and a half through our major city streets and through our major college thoroughfares. We live in a world where good is evil, evil is good. Students need safe spaces. I used to think how pathetic for our college students to need safe spaces, but now truly Jewish students really do need literal safe spaces. Discourse is no longer the norm, no longer that which is encouraged. The thought police are out. We live in a world where it's demonstrable where the words of one individual whether they speak vulgarly and crassly or thoughtlessly, but the words of that one individual can be viewed as worse than potential criminal activity. In fact, in Lucy Connolly's case, it was viewed, a tweet was viewed, which she retracted, nonetheless, was viewed as criminal activity, and she was found guilty. We live in a world, though, let's look closer, where the church has a national reputation slightly north of our politicians. That's not very high. It might have something to do with the fact that when you look at social demographics of our culture, the demographics of our churches do not seem demonstrably, measurably different from that of society at large. What makes us different? I can't speak for the church. I can speak for this local manifestation of the church, Beth Sar Shalom. How are we to be distinguished in a devolving world, in a world so morally slippery? How are we to keep our footing? I suggest that we remember that although the bridegroom has indeed been taken away from us, he is nonetheless still with us. Remember, he says, "Lo, I will be with you even unto the end of the age." And so we can live in the light of our Messiah's presence in our lives. And we can represent to a world that doesn't have a clue who he is, except from what they may see in the movies or if they catch an episode of The Chosen. Right? We can, nonetheless, represent Jesus, Yeshua. We can go and we can interact with people whose morals are, let's say, confused, whose morals don't align with that of the Scripture, with the New Testament. But we can do as Jesus did, and we can serve as physicians for this sick world, representing Him, the ultimate great physician. If this nation, if our world is not sick, I have no other diagnosis. Our culture, our world is diseased, it is sick. And that disease is called sin, nothing new, nothing surprising. But we have the cure. That's why I can so confidently say that each one of us can serve as a physician, representing the great physician. Because we have the cure is none other than our Messiah. So this week, let's remember who it is we represent, the Messiah, who our true focus should be. And as we deal with people, as we deal with our fractured, broken society at large, let's stand for the Lord. Stand for the Messiah. And now I'm going to ask you if you would stand so that I may bless you with the Aaronic benediction. Oh, no, we're going to stand and we're going to take communion together, because there it is to my right, and very clearly my peripheral vision is not what it used to be. So we can stand together and in unity, let's pass these out, we can partake of the bread and of the juice, and we can remember our Messiah, that He is the answer, that He is the physician for a sick world, He is the cure. Reminds me of that great theologian, Sylvester Stallone, in that great classic film, Cobra, 1983. His great line in the trailer was, "You're the disease, I'm the cure," right? And the world is diseased. Cobra's not the cure. Sylvester Stallone's not the cure. Right idea, though. Wrong focus point. Jesus is the cure. And so we remember His death, His burial, His resurrection. And we remember that He's coming back. He's not on vacation right now. He's watching. He's waiting. He's interacting and interceding on our behalf as our great high priest. And so Yeshua took that bread and He said, "This is my body. It is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Which was immediately followed by Him taking the third cup, the cup of redemption, and proclaiming that this is the new covenant in my blood poured out for the many for the forgiveness of sin. And so we drink together in remembrance of Him. Our Father and our God, bless our people. Strengthen us to represent You. Give us boldness. Give us confidence. Give us opportunity to stand in the gap for those who so desperately need You. Our Father and our God, we ask in the name of Yeshua, amen.